Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Goalie Glove Box. I'm Coach Dan. I'm the founder and head instructor of Dan Blackmore Goaltending, and I wanted to start today by talking about rust and how to shake off rust after we take a long break during the season. We're still in the early parts of January, so a lot of goalies are just getting back from the winter break and just getting back into their regular routine, and it's easy to feel off or to feel out of sync with the grind of the hockey season when you come back after a long break. So the first point that I want to make on rust is that feeling a bit rusty or feeling off is normal. If you're feeling like you have poor rebound control in practice or those first couple of games that you come back, maybe you're feeling a little bit lethargic or slow when you're skating, you're feeling behind the play, or it could be something as simple as just feeling like you're getting tired really easily and that your conditioning might not be up to par. The important thing to realize here is that this isn't a regression in skill. It's not like you just became a bad goalie over the 1 or 2 weeks that you were off for Christmas or the holiday season or whatever break you might have been taking. It's just a disruption to your rhythm. You're not used to seeing a lot of pucks. You're not used to having a lot of reps in practice. And so don't panic. It's completely normal to be a little bit off, and there are a lot of tools that you can use to get back into that routine as quickly as possible so you can get back on track with your performance and your development. The first step to getting back to normalcy is to identify specific issues that you're having and whether or not these are relating to the break that you took. So if you're finding that you're in the net and the puck looks like it's moving 100 miles an hour, you can't keep up with the play, the passes are going back and forth, you're losing vision on it, you're losing your tracking, and you just feel like, whoa, I am way out to lunch here. I don't know what's going on. I'm late to everything. I'm so behind, and I'm not sure why. This is something that you can more easily identify as, okay, so this is a timing and a speed issue, and I know that I was okay with this before the break, or I know that I was good with this before the break. And so I can just identify that, all right, I need to get my feet back under me as quickly as possible. I need to get myself back up to speed. And I need to focus on my ability to track the plays as they're developing so that I'm up to speed and able to perform in games and practices. It could also be something technical. If you find that you're struggling with your rebound control, for example, you're going to make stick saves on low shots and everything is going back up the middle, either off your stick or maybe you're even missing it with your stick and pucks are hitting your pad and shooting back up. Rust can manifest itself in a variety of ways, and so we really need to be aware of what specific things we're struggling with so that we can focus in on those problems and prioritize those problems before we get back into our regular routine. Once we know what things we're struggling with, it's important to simplify things as much as possible and really focus in on those 1 or 2 specific things that we're struggling with. We're not trying to be perfect right away, and we're not trying to get right back up to speed and hit the ground running immediately. And so we really just want to take the time, recognize, okay, this is the thing that I've identified that I'm struggling with. Now I'm going to be patient and take the time to work through that. I'll give you an example from a private session I did with a goalie a couple of weeks ago. I had a goalie come out for a session with me, and they were really struggling with their vision. They weren't watching the puck off of my stick when I was taking shots. They were tucking their chin and just waving at the puck with their glove or their blocker, and they were getting beat clean on a lot of shots that they otherwise would have been making easy saves on if they were just focusing on their vision and turning their head, following the puck all the way in. You know, one of the things I like to say is nose to puck, where as that puck is coming into either the glove or the blocker, the head should be turning the whole time and watching that puck all the way in. So we identified it, and I talked to the goalie, and he said, yeah, I've been really struggling with my vision since I got back from the break. And so what we did is we put his stick in the corner. I put his hands behind his back, and I had him just sit in his butterfly at the top of the crease, and I just took shots on him over his right and his left shoulder, just above the pad, and I said, okay, we're not going to try to make saves here. We're just going to focus on turning our head and watching the puck the whole time. So I told him, like, you're going to sit in your butterfly and you're just going to turn your head and watch the puck and turn your head and watch the puck. And I was mixing it up. I was shooting to different sides, so he couldn't just guess and turn his head one way or the other. He really had to focus on just moving his head and his eyes with the puck the whole time. And then once he started feeling more comfortable with that, I think we did that for about 5 or 10 minutes of not even making saves, just watching the puck. We got the stick back in our hands. We got our hands back in front. We sat in the butterfly again, and now we started adding the reaction to it as well. And the difference, even in just that 5 to 10 minutes that we took away from it, was immediate, and it was significant. He was watching the puck a lot better. It wasn't perfect, and like I said, we're not trying to be perfect right away, but he was doing a much better job of seeing the puck, tracking it, and not only was he making a lot more saves, but the rebound control was significantly improved as well. So that's just an example of the type of thing that you can do when you're struggling with something, even if it's not within the context of having taken a break and being rusty. Just try to isolate the specific skill that you're struggling with as much as possible and get down to that most minute detail of, okay, I need to turn my head when the pucks are coming in, and that's the only thing that I'm going to be focusing on for the next 10, 15, 20 minutes, whatever the case may be. To that point, another important aspect of shaking off rust is to emphasize process over results. I know that I've talked about that previously in training in general, but especially in the case of timing issues or not being up to speed with the play, it's important that we recognize that we didn't just become a bad goalie over the last 1 or 2 weeks that we took off. We just need to see more reps, feel more pucks hit us, and get back into that rhythm as much as possible. And that just takes time. And it takes a lot of shots, and it takes a lot of practices. Some goalies can take as little as 2 practices to get back into rhythm. Other goalies need 2 or 3 weeks of heavy ice times, practices, and games before they start feeling like themselves again. To that point, if you are really struggling with your rust, I would even say don't focus on results in games, especially those first 2 or 3 games after the break. I know you want to start the second half of the year on a good note, but every team is going to be feeling a little bit rusty, and it's okay to take things game by game. And rather than say, did we win? Did we lose? Did I play well? Ask yourself, how did I feel? Did I feel like I was engaged the whole time? Did I feel like the play was getting away from me? On the goals that I did let in, were they technical things that I can actually work on in practice? Or are those a case of still just being a little bit out of my routine and rhythm? So focus on those trends and focus on getting back to feeling better in games rather than win, loss, save percentage, goals against, whatever the case may be, however you're tracking your performance when you're regularly in your routine. On the note of routine, I think one of the things that gets overlooked when we talk about rust and we talk about taking time off is our body readiness away from the rink. It's quite common when you come back from a break to feel not as strong, maybe feeling a little bit tight, not as limber, maybe not sore because you've had rest, but just like your muscles aren't moving in the way that you're used to because they haven't been moving in the way that they've been used to. They've been taking time off just as you've been taking time off yourself. And the way to work through this really depends on your specific needs and your specific issues. Again, like I said, we try to focus on specific issues on ice in our training, and it's the same case when we're trying to work on our off-ice ability as well. So if you're coming back after break and you're thinking, oh, I'm feeling kind of weak at practice today, like my legs feel like jelly when I'm on the ice, I'm not getting very strong pushes, maybe that's a situation where you need to take more time in the gym. If you're already going to the gym twice a week on your normal routine, maybe you add an extra session every week or an extra session every 2 weeks. Pump it up a little bit more just to get that strength and that feeling of power underneath you and in your legs and in your body, and then tone it back down to your regular routine after you've gotten that strength back. If it's something where your muscles are feeling more stiff, you're not feeling as flexible as you used to be, you're not as limber, this might be a case where you need to take longer warm-ups. if you're used to showing up to games an hour early, maybe you show up an hour and 15 minutes early so you can extend the warm-up time that you have, spend a little bit more energy and a little bit more effort and a little bit more focus on stretching, getting your dynamic warm-up in, getting the blood flowing before a game. And then once you feel like you've got your flexibility back, then we can, again, strip it back to our regular routine, hour before the game and our regular warm-up. The point is that we want to get back to being athletic as fast as possible. And in some cases, that's going to require just a little bit more effort after we get back from a long break. The last point I'll make on shaking off rust is when we think about how long it will take to get back to our regular routine, focus on a timeline and trends rather than a hard deadline. If you set a specific deadline of, okay, by my third practice, I have to be back up to full speed, that can add a lot of unnecessary pressure and take away from your ability to get back to feeling as good as you need to be. Everybody is different and everyone is going to take a different amount of time to feel ready. And so, again, focus in on trends from practice to practice or game to game. Do I feel more normal than I did yesterday? Do I feel like the game is getting away from me a little bit less than my last time on the ice? And as you monitor your progress and as you monitor how you're feeling those first few skates back, that's when you can start establishing a timeline of, okay, I think by middle of January, I'm going to feel 100%. And that's when I'm going to be ready to get back into the grind of what can be a very long hockey season. I wanted to finish this podcast by talking a little bit about the Olympic rosters, which were announced over the holiday break. I won't get into too much detail here, and I think once we get a little bit closer to the tournament, I'll get into things like predictions, maybe even reactions to the tournament as it's going on and things like that. But for now, I just wanted to focus on a few of the major teams in the tournament and their goaltending situations as of the recording of this show. So to start, looking at Team Czechia, they have Lukas Dostal, Karel Vejmelka, and Dan Vladar in net. I think this is probably one of my favorite tandems in the tournament. I think Dostal and Vejmelka are very underrated. I think playing in the Western Conference and having a lot of late games affects how much people on the eastern side of the continent get to see them, but I've been watching a lot of their games this year and going back to last year and a couple years ago as well. And I really like both of these goalies. And I think that they're good enough that they can steal games in a short tournament like this one. Things haven't been going fantastic lately in Anaheim. They're on a bit of a skid, but they started quite hot and Dostal was a big part of that. And he's played well for them over the past few years. Conversely, Vejmelka was off to a bit of a tough start in Utah, but has really picked up his play lately and is a big reason why the Mammoth are in a playoff spot today. I've liked Vladar going back to his days in Calgary, and he's had a very solid year this year in Philadelphia. So overall, I think Czechia has a very deep tandem. They've got three good goalies, and I think any one of them can play, compete, and even steal a game against some of the more traditional powerhouses that are in this tournament. For Team Finland, they've gone with Jussi Saros, Kevin Lankinen, and Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. They're a little thin on goaltending. It's different to, the World Cup of Hockey in 2016 when you could just run Rask, Rinne, and whoever. It doesn't matter who your third goalie is at that point. Saros is a good goalie, but he's had a couple of down seasons. He is the most experienced, so I would figure that he would be the starter. He was one of the initial players that they announced to the team, so I think he's going to have to shoulder the majority of workload. And we talked in one of our earlier shows about a bit of a competition for the second and third spots on the team between Lankinen, Luukkonen, and Korpisalo. I think they went with Lankinen because he's got a bit more experience starting games and shouldering a lot of workload. You think of the times this year and last year that Thatcher Demko has been down with injury in Vancouver and Lankinen's had to step up in those situations. It hasn't been going great this year, but again, there aren't a lot of options for Team Finland. So I think in this case, they just kind of valued the experience that Lankinen brings, and that's why he makes this team. On the other hand, Luukkonen has really picked up his game, especially in December. And when we talk about that competition for goalie spots, I think of the three, Luukkonen was the one who really stepped up and said, I deserve to be on this team. I think that's why he makes the team over a guy like Jonas Korpisalo. Luukkonen's been a big reason why Buffalo has been on a bit of a heater recently and why they're now in the playoff hunt. And so I'm not surprised that he was one of the goalies that was named to this team. Again, of the major teams at this tournament, I think Finland has the biggest question marks in net, and especially if Saros either goes down with injury or isn't playing well. And especially when you look at some of the injuries that they have, particularly Alexander Barkov, I don't think that this team is deep enough to make up for poor goaltending or for inconsistent goaltending if Saros isn't able to really handle a heavy workload. And so I think that's something that we'll definitely have to be looking for once the tournament gets underway. For Team Sweden, they've gone with Jesper Wallstedt, Philip Gustafsson, and Jacob Markstrom. I think it's just really cool to see two teammates on the same Olympic roster as goalies. That's something that's very rare. I don't know how many times it's happened before with some of the major powerhouse countries like Canada, USA, Sweden, Finland, Czechia, Russia, etc. So I just think it's a really cool story to see both of them on this team, and both of them probably figuring to play a big role for this team as the tournament gets underway. Wallstedt obviously had an incredible start to the season, and his pace has slowed down a bit, but on the whole, I think that he'll still be the starting goalie for this team just based off of how well this season's been going for him and the fact that he has the best numbers out of all three. Even though he is the youngest of the three, I think you start him, see how he handles the pressure of all of these big games, and they will all be big games. And then if you need to move off of him, you've got his teammate who's used to having a bit of a tandem situation in Philip Gustafsson, who's also having a great season and who's had a bit of a heater recently. And if you need to, after that, you've got Jacob Markstrom as a third option who, while he hasn't had the best season so far, he does bring a lot of experience. And I figure in this tournament, he probably looks to play a bit more of a mentorship role for the two younger goalies. But all in all, I think this is a really, really good tandem for a Swedish team that, if you don't even look at their goalies, they're already very deep and they can compete. But with this goalie situation, I think they have the possibility of being a dominant team in this tournament. And they definitely have as good a chance as, Canada or the United States of winning a gold medal in this tournament. So very exciting to see. And as a Canadian, this team and these goalies especially definitely make me nervous going into the tournament. For Team USA, unsurprisingly, they've gone with the same goalie group as the Four Nations tournament, and it's probably the deepest goalie situation of the Olympics. They have Connor Hellebuck, Jeremy Swayman, and Jake Ottinger. Hellebuck is the obvious starter. He's a back-to-back Vezina Trophy winner, Hart Trophy winner, and despite the slide that Winnipeg is on, and the fact that he's had his playoff struggles recently in Winnipeg, he showed at the Four Nations face-off that he can show up in big games, he can play well in big games, and he can steal big games. So I think this is another situation where you keep it simple, you start Hellebuck as still one of the best goalies in the world, and if you need to move off of him, if he's struggling, you have two great options behind him. Swayman's numbers look a little pedestrian at only a .905 save percentage, but Boston gives up a lot of quality chances, and he's among the league leaders in goals saved above expected. So I think he is the number two option if you do need to move off of Hellebuck, especially considering that lately Ottinger has been struggling and Dallas is facing their first bit of adversity throughout the season. All in all, like I said, I think this is the best goalie tandem or the best goalie trio of the tournament. And I know that there was a lot of noise made about the rest of the, United States roster, and particularly some of the omissions to the U.S. roster, but I think they've done the right thing with their goalies, and they're definitely the trio to beat in this tournament. Lastly, looking at Team Canada, they've gone with Jordan Binnington, Logan Thompson, and Darcy Kemper. The obvious question mark here is Jordan Binnington. He has not been good at all this season. His save percentage is well below .880, and if he wasn't on the Four Nations team last year, I don't think there's a chance that he would make this team. Having said that, if you remember going back to the Four Nations face-off, there were a lot of questions asked about Binnington going into that tournament. And even during the tournament, when play got underway, there were a lot of questions being asked about his performance throughout the tournament. And we all saw how that ended. He's shown throughout his career, whether it's Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final or the finals of the first best-on-best international tournament since the 2014 Olympics, that he can step up in those big moments. And so obviously I think that's why he's on this team. And it'll be interesting to see if he can sort of rewrite the narrative on his season so far and use this tournament as a bit of a statement to say, I'm still that guy and I can still perform when it matters most. I was very surprised to see that neither of the Colorado goalies made the team. Wedgwood and Blackwood are both among the league leaders in save percentage, and more to that point, they both are playing behind a really dominant team in Colorado, and it's not always easy to play behind dominant teams who carry a lot of possession and who maybe don't give up a lot of opportunities, but when they do, you need to be ready for them and just be able to make that one or two big saves and then let your offensive juggernauts and your defensive talent take over the rest of the game. I think that's a skill that not every goalie can handle, or that not every goalie has. And I think obviously both of the Colorado goalies have that ability. And I just think that that skill would have been very transferable to playing behind Team Canada, which is obviously, one of those powerhouse teams, gold or bust mentality. But having said that, one of the consistent themes with Canada's goalies and their team in general is looking to have players and have goalies that have big game experience. All three goalies on this team have won a Stanley Cup. I talked about Jordan Binnington winning his Stanley Cup in Game 7 with St. Louis. Kemper won with Colorado when they put a stop to the Lightning's quest for a three-peat. And people forget because he wasn't the goalie of record, but Logan Thompson won a Stanley Cup with Vegas as well. So I think the common theme there is that they're favoring guys who have played in those big moments, who have gone on deep playoff runs, who know what it takes and what it's like to win a championship. So in that sense, I can kind of see why they would maybe leave off some of the other names that might be having better individual seasons and going towards that more big game experience of the three guys that they took. Again, the biggest question mark here is who plays. I think if you were just to look at who's the better goalie today, or who has showed that they can play the best today, Logan Thompson would be my pick to start. But from the perspective of Team Canada management, I don't think that you're taking Jordan Binnington to this tournament to sit on the bench. If you're taking Binnington, despite his poor performance this season, you're taking him because you believe that he can handle those big moments, and because, to his credit, he's shown you that he can handle those big moments. So I think that they're going to start Binnington, ride him until he gives them a reason to not continue to play him, and then I think Logan Thompson would be the secondary option to go to if Binnington shows that he's more like the goalie that he showed this year compared to the goalie that he showed at the Four Nations face-off. So that is it for this one. I'd like to thank you again if you made it all the way through. I hope you can take something away from today to your next game or practice. If you'd like to leave any feedback, or if you'd like to learn more about the goalie coaching services that I offer, please reach out to me at danblackmoregoaltending@gmail.com or follow and DM me on Instagram at danblackmoregoaltending. Thank you, and I'll talk to you next week.